and I was just high, drugs, I was drugged out, thugged out. Everything you want to say. I slept, ended up sleeping under the parked cars and parked trucks. Did you know that the Gap Band, once a big name in funk music, had a really sad ending? They made hit songs that people still love today, but their story is full of heartbreak. What happened to the members of this famous group? Why did their success fade away? Their lives took a tragic turn, and their journey ended in pain. Let's look at their sad story and what went wrong. The Gap Band started in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in 1967. It was formed by three brothers, Charlie, Ronnie, and Robert Wilson. Sometimes other musicians would join them, but the Wilson brothers were always at the center. At first, they had a long name, Greenwood Archer and Pine Band. This name came from streets in Tulsa. It was actually a joke, but later they shortened it to the Gap Band, which made it easier to say and remember. Oklahoma. And I said to Oklahoma, now you've got to admit, this is a little strange. I mean, Tulsa? I would expect you to be maybe into country music or something like that. The Gap Band started out experimenting with their sound and got a break in 1974 when Leon Russell let them back his album Stop All That Jazz. Their early funk albums, Magician's Holiday, things changed when producer Lonnie Simmons signed them to Mercury Records. Their 1979 album The Gap Band featured Shake, a top 10 R&B hit. That same year, I Don't Believe You Want to Get Up and Dance hit number 4 on the R&B charts, and Steppin' Out also made the top 10. Say Oops Up Your Head, Say Oops Upside Your Head, Say Oops. They embraced synthesizers, giving their music a fresh, modern edge. By 1980, the Gap Band had finally made it. That year, they released the Gap Band 3, which became their biggest album yet. It had several hit songs, including Yearning for Your Love, a smooth romantic song, and Burn Rubber Why You Wanna Hurt Me, a funky energetic track. The album reached number 1 on the R&B chart and number 16 on the Billboard 200 chart, making the band more famous than ever before. Do you travel a great deal? Unfortunately, yes, we do. That's the hard part. That is the hard part. Is Tulsa still home? No, we live in Los Angeles. In 1982, Gap Band, Ford topped the R&B charts with hits like Early in the Morning, You Dropped a Bomb on Me, and Outstanding. These tracks became party staples. Around this time, singer Dawn Silva joined their tour. Their 1983 album Gap Band 4 went gold but wasn't as big as previous releases. It featured Party Train and Jam the Moda, plus a Stevie Wonder collab, Someday. In 1989, the Gap Band signed with Capitol Records. Their first song on the new label, All of My Love, became their last number 1 hit on the R&B charts. They also released other songs from the album Round Trip, like Addicted to Your Love, which reached number 8, and We Can Make It All Right, which peaked at number 18 on the R&B charts. However, their time with Capitol Records was short. They left the label the following year and took a long break from making new music. During the 1990s, the Gap Band released 3 studio albums and 2 live albums. Unfortunately, none of these albums made a big impact, and they did not chart. By this time, their popularity had faded, and they were no longer making big hits. Before the Tulsa's Black Wall Street attack, Black Wall Street was a successful place where black families had their own businesses, homes, and schools. Even though Oklahoma had strict racist laws, the people in Greenwood built a community where they could thrive. It was a symbol of black success and independence. They had hospitals, motels, banks, everything. But on May 31, 1921, white mobs invaded the area. They burned buildings, killed residents, and destroyed everything the people had worked so hard to build. The Tulsa Race Massacre is one of the worst racial attacks in American history, but for many years, people did not talk about it. Schools did not teach it, and many newspapers ignored it. Charlie Wilson, the lead singer of the Gap Band, often talked about the history of Black Wall Street when the group toured in the 1980s. He wanted to make sure people never forgot what happened. He once said that when they told the story, many people were shocked. They had never heard about the massacre before. That is because the truth was hidden for a long time. Some historians believe the government and newspapers tried to keep it a secret. Her name was Lucille Figures. She was born in 1909. In recent years, more people have learned about the massacre. TV shows like Watchmen and Lovecraft Country have shown scenes based on what really happened in 1921. More documentaries and books have also helped spread the truth. One of the Gap Band's most famous songs is You Dropped a Bomb on Me. Some people thought this song was about the Tulsa Race Massacre. They believed it was a secret way of talking about the bombs that were dropped on Black Wall Street during the attack. But Charlie Wilson said that was not true. The song was really about love and heartbreak. However, he did not mind that people made the connection. He said that if the song helped people learn about the race massacre, then that was a good thing. The bomb was not written for the race riot, the 1921 race riot. It's played in so many places now, even in elevators. You can get on the elevator, hear the record now, so it's coming to life again. It's bringing attention back to the race riot. The Gap Band officially retired in 2010, but their music is still played and loved today. Even though the band was about making fun and exciting music, they also made sure people remembered Tulsa's history. Charlie Wilson has always believed that the story of Black Wall Street needs to be told. He once said, "Better late than never," because even if it took many years for people to talk about it, it is important that the truth is finally being shared. The heirs of the royalties lawsuit against BMG, Gap Band members had filed a lawsuit against BMG Rights Management. They claimed that BMG had not paid them the royalties they were owed for being credited as co-writers of the hit song Uptown Funk. However, the lawsuit has now been dropped. Got Chuck with, "Gotta Kiss Myself, So Pretty." The case was filed in a federal court in Manhattan. A document was submitted saying the lawsuit was dismissed without prejudice. This means the case is closed for now, but they could file it again in the future if they choose to. The heirs of the Wilson brothers said that BMG failed to pay them what they were owed. They said BMG had a contract to give them royalties but did not follow through. They wanted BMG to pay them for their part in the song Uptown Funk. In 2015, they were added as co-writers of Uptown Funk because of similarities between the two songs. Other producers, Rudolph Taylor and Lonnie Simmons, were also given credit as co-writers. At that time, the song Uptown Funk already had 6 credited writers before the Gap Band members were added. The original writers were Mark Ronson, Bruno Mars, producers Jeff Bosker and Philip Lawrence, and artist Nicholas Williams, also known as Trinidad James, and Devin Gaspi. Trinidad James's song All Gold Everything was sampled in Uptown Funk, which is why he was credited. The lawsuit claimed that an agreement was made on March 31, 2015. In this agreement, different music companies, including BMG, Universal Music, and Sony ATV Songs, agreed to give the Gap Band members a share of Uptown Funk's copyright. Ronnie and Robert Wilson were each given 3.4% of the song's copyright as compensation for using parts of Oops Upside Your Head and Uptown Funk. The lawsuit also claimed that BMG had ignored this agreement and refused to pay royalties. The heirs of Ronnie and Robert Wilson said they never received the money they were promised. They took BMG to court, demanding payment. BMG responded to the lawsuit by saying they did not agree to a settlement and had not paid any money. They said the lawsuit had no real basis. They pointed out that the heirs of the Gap Band members had now withdrawn their claims. BMG said this showed that the accusations against them were not true. In their statement, BMG also said they are committed to treating artists fairly and being transparent in their business. They said they are proud to represent the music of the Gap Band members and honor their legacy. Charlie Wilson, the third member of the band, was not part of the lawsuit. Uptown Funk has been a massive hit since it was released. The song has been streamed over 1.6 billion times on Spotify. On YouTube, its music video is the 4th most viewed video of all time. The song's success brought a lot of money to its writers, which is why the Gap Band heirs wanted to make sure they were paid fairly for their contributions. Mark Ronson, one of the main creators of Uptown Funk, has said in interviews that they did not copy Oops Upside Your Head on purpose. He said they did not take anything from the Gap Band song, either intentionally or unintentionally. However, the similarities were clear enough that the Wilson brothers and others were added as co-writers. In 2020, Mark Ronson sold 70% of his share in his music catalog to a company called Hypnosis Songs Fund. This included his earnings from Uptown Funk. This shows how valuable the song remains, even years after its release. Now that the lawsuit has been dropped, it is unclear if the Gap Band heirs will try again to get the royalties they believe they deserve. For now, BMG has won this legal battle. Struggles with record labels and their legacy. The band faced many problems with record labels and management. These problems affected their music, their creativity, and even their relationships with each other. One of the biggest struggles for the Gap Band was dealing with record labels. They worked with companies like Total Experience and Capitol Records. At first, these labels helped the band become famous. They provided money for recording, promotion, and tours. But as time passed, disagreements started to happen. The band wanted more control over their music and career, but the labels wanted to make decisions that would bring in the most money. This created tension. The band members often felt trapped in contracts that did not benefit them. They had to follow the label's rules, even when they did not agree. This made it hard for them to be as creative as they wanted. Another big problem was management contracts. The people managing the band were supposed to help them succeed, but sometimes managers made choices that did not benefit the band members. Disagreements over money and decisions caused stress and even fights within the band. Some members felt they were not being treated fairly. This tension affected their ability to make music together. When a band is not united, it is hard to keep creating great songs. These problems with management made things even more difficult for the Gap Band. Over the years, the Gap Band's sound changed. In the beginning, they played pure funk music. Their style was raw, exciting, and full of energy. This is what made them popular, but as time went on, their sound became more commercial. The record labels wanted them to make music that would sell more records. This meant changing their style to appeal to a wider audience. While this helped them reach more people, some longtime fans were not happy. Many felt that the Gap Band was losing its original funk sound. They believed the band was becoming too mainstream and not as exciting as before. This created a divide between the band and some of their loyal fans. The band had to balance making music they loved with keeping the record labels happy. Another challenge the Gap Band faced was over their name and legacy. As time went on, different versions of the band appeared. Some former members or other musicians started using the Gap Band's name. This caused confusion, as fans were not always sure if they were seeing the real band or a different version. There were also legal battles over who had the right to use the name. This led to arguments and a divided legacy. Instead of being remembered as one united group, the Gap Band's history became complicated. One day, Run DMC was on tour and turned down a lucrative deal with the Gap Band. Run DMC was a rising rap group, and rap was still new. Many people didn't think rap music would last, but it was getting big, and the Gap Band noticed. One night, Charlie Wilson, his manager, and another guy from the Gap Band went to talk to Run DMC. They knocked on the door where Run DMC was, and when they came in, they had a surprising request. The promoter and manager told Run DMC that they wanted them to close the show for the rest of the tour, but there was a catch: they weren't going to get paid as the main act. They would still be treated like an opening act, even though they were going last. This was a big deal because usually the main act closes the show. Charlie Wilson agreed with the promoter, but it was a funny moment because he was not really facing them when he spoke. At that time, some artists didn't believe in rap music. They thought it wouldn't last long, but Charlie Wilson wasn't like that. He saw that rap was going to be huge. He was happy to be on tour with Run DMC and enjoyed performing with them. He knew they were going to be big. There was even a chance for the Gap Band to work with Russell Simmons, the man behind Run DMC. Russell wanted to sign the Gap Band. He saw something special in them, but Charlie's brother wasn't sure about it. He thought Russell might not be the right person to work with, so they didn't take the deal. Looking back, Charlie believes it could have been huge for the Gap Band if they had worked with Russell. They might have made some great music together. They could have mixed funk, rock, and rap to create something different. Even though they didn't sign with Russell, Charlie still enjoyed the tour. He had a lot of respect for Run DMC and saw their talent. But when people ask him today about that time, he laughs and says he doesn't remember everything. It was so many years ago, and a lot happened back then. Besides the struggles in the music business, Charlie Wilson also had personal struggles. He got caught up in drugs. His story is an amazing story of grace and mercy and recovery. It took over his life. It was a dark time for him. He recalls one time when he was severely ill, weighing only about 115 pounds. His mother told him he was dying. At that moment, he didn't understand but later realized how close he was to death. She said she had been sober for 3 years, and that realization helped him. He looked back and saw how much of a toll his lifestyle had taken on him. There was a time when Charlie was offered a huge deal to leave the Gap Band. Some people came to him and told him they would give him $1 million if he left the group. They wanted him to be the Black Elton John. They had songwriters ready for him and big plans to make him a solo star, but Charlie didn't understand it at the time. He was young, and to him, the Gap Band was family. He couldn't just walk away from his brothers. He even cursed at the people offering him the deal because he felt like they were trying to break up his family. Looking back, he now realizes what a big opportunity it was, but he still doesn't regret his decision. Charlie was only 21 years old at that time. If he had taken the deal, he knows things would have turned out very differently. There was so much money, and everything around him was pulling him in that direction, but Charlie knows that God had a plan for him. He believes he would have ended up dead at a young age, just like Andy Gibb from the Bee Gees. Fame and fortune can be dangerous when you're young and surrounded by the wrong things. He knows now that God had a plan for him and that he had to go through certain struggles to get where he is today. Charlie says God doesn't make mistakes. Sometimes life takes you in circles, making you bump your head over and over until you finally learn the lesson. He went through a lot with his brothers and the Gap Band, and it wasn't always good, but in the end, he believes it was all part of the journey he was meant to take. He turned down the $1 million offer, and his older brother told him he wouldn't have done the same. His brother said, "Better you than me, because if it had been him, he would have left a long time ago." At the time, $1 million was a huge amount of money. This was the early 70s, and Charlie was just a young man, but he stayed with the Gap Band. The sad part is, despite all their success, he never made any money from it, not even from their live shows. While he was out performing and making hits, someone else was taking all the money. When he was asked who was getting paid, Charlie simply said, "My brother." That's why his brother said he would have left. It wasn't just about the offer to go solo, it was also about the fact that Charlie was working hard but not getting what he deserved. The music industry can be tough, and a lot of artists, especially back then, were taken advantage of. Looking back, Charlie says he didn't always know the truth about what was happening in the band. He trusted his older brother because that's what younger brothers do. He believed everything his brother said. If his brother said, "Don't do this, don't do that," he listened. But later, he realized that things were not as they seemed. He found out that money was being taken from them. It hurt, but he had to face the truth. Charlie recently talked about how hard it is to do business with family. He asked, "What do you do when your family is the one taking from you? Do you sue them? How do you handle that?" It's not an easy thing to deal with. Unfortunately, both of his brothers have passed away now, but before one of them died, Charlie got to have a long conversation with him. His brother was on his deathbed and couldn't talk much, but Charlie made sure to ask him everything he needed to know. He also told him, "I'm not mad at you." That was important to him. He wanted to clear the air and let go of any anger he had. When asked about award shows, Charlie was honest. He said they don't really matter to him anymore. He has been to the Grammys 13 times. It's just a TV moment for people. He knows how these award shows work. They already know who they are going to give the awards to. He said, unless you're a rapper, you ain't going to get too much of this. R&B and soul artists don't get the same recognition. Most of their awards are given out before the main show even starts. They don't get the big spotlight, they just have to sit and wait to see if they win anything during the main event. Charlie has had an amazing career, but does he feel like he gets the respect he deserves? He doesn't seem too worried about that. He knows what he has done. He knows how many hits he has made. The numbers don't lie. But at the end of the day, awards don't define him. His music, his journey, and his growth as a person are what really matter. In 2005, the Gap Band received a major honor when they were named BMI Icons at the 57th Annual BMI Urban Awards. This award was given to them because their music had influenced many artists. One of their biggest hits, Outstanding, became one of the most sampled songs in music history. More than 150 artists have used parts of this song in their own music. Even rock musicians were influenced by the Gap Band. Nirvana's drummer, Dave Grohl, once said that their music inspired the drumbeat for Smells Like Teen Spirit, one of Nirvana's biggest hits. This showed how far their influence reached beyond R&B and into other genres like rock. Sadly, 2 members of the Gap Band passed away. Robert Wilson, the band's bassist, died of a heart attack in 2010 at the age of 53. Ronnie Wilson, another key member, suffered a stroke and passed away in 2021 at the age of 73. Even though the Gap Band is no longer active, their music continues to be a major influence. Many R&B and hip-hop artists have sampled their songs. Artists like Mary J. Blige, Snoop Dogg, Ice Cube, and Nas have all used the Gap Band's music in their own songs. Even international artists have been inspired by them. A Polish rap group used a sample of Outstanding in their song Lore.